This is the first major airline disaster we have had in the United States in many a year. And on days like this, and unfortunately, if you do this as long as I have, beginning in 1990, you've gone through a lot of days like this. All I try to do is not make it worse for anyone who's connected to the disaster. The American Airlines jet, the Black Hawk helicopter, 67 human beings are dead. Most of them are Americans. I do not know who's at fault. I've listened to everything. I want to play it for you, what has been said thus far. I'll talk to Michael Duncan and others. There's also a hostage release today in Israel I want to update you on. There are a lot of stories, but as to commenting on causation, I have no knowledge. No one in the media does. Some people in the government might, and they will step forward and give us details as it is available. People have hunches. People have beliefs. All I am reminded of is an interview I did in 1996 for PBS with Rabbi Harold Kushner, author of When Bad Things Happen to Good People. All anyone can do for the family and friends of the 67 people who are dead is show up and shut up and not make it worse. Don't tell them you know how you feel. You don't. You can cut their grass. You can get them groceries. I also think today of everyone who has lost a loved one in a sudden fatal accident. Not in a war, not in an invasion, not in an attack like 9/11. I was live that day. It's very difficult to be on the air when something like that happens. You do the best you can, and we did the best we could 24 years ago. But the one thing you don't want to do is pretend that it's about you. It's not about me. It's not about anybody. I have some condemnation for last night's posters who were just ghoulishly engagement farming. That's depraved. That's absolutely depraved. They have no business doing that, attempting to assign blame to Donald Trump. I couldn't believe it last night. They were in the water looking for people. But I do want to emphasize, it's not about me. It's not about you, unless you're a family member or a close friend of one of the victims. And that's about you and your suffering, and the appropriate response for everyone is to mourn with those who mourn. That is a Christian injunction. Mourn with those who mourn. It's a very terrible situation. There will be answers. National Traffic Safety Board is very good at this. In the old days, when I was practicing law, I had a law partner, Tim Cook, still a friend. He's retired too from the practice of law. Aircraft disaster specialist. He had been a A6 pilot in Vietnam, and he went to law school and Department of Justice. And when we would have airplane crashes around the world, Tim would always make himself available and talk about aerodynamics and what looked like, et cetera. There's been enough of that, and Tim is retired, and I'm retired. I have no idea whether it's the Black Hawk helicopter, whether it's air traffic control, whether it's the American Airlines pilot out of their lane. I have no idea. Nobody does. But I did appreciate that the first thing I saw this morning was Secretary of Defense Hegseth making this comment, this release, cut number 10.
All right, update this morning. Just got off the phone with the Southcom commander and the chairman, the Joint Chiefs, talking about our efforts at Guantanamo Bay. That is ongoing. We're leaning forward on supporting the president's directive to make sure that we have a location for violent criminal illegals as they are deported out of the country. No one's going to wait on the Defense Department, and we're working that in real time. But I also wanted to give an update on the tragedy that happened last night here in Washington, D.C., and provide a little bit more information as we are actively working to investigate and understand what occurred and why. At about 8:48 last night, a UH-60 assigned to the U.S. Army Aviation Brigade in the Military District of Washington, Fort Belvoir, Virginia, collided tragically with a civilian airliner. The unit involved, the Army unit involved, was Bravo Company 12th Aviation Battalion at Fort Belvoir. It was an annual proficiency training flight. And when we look at the crew, and not all kin have been notified, so we're going to withhold ranks and names at this point. We do know on our side who was involved. It was a fairly experienced crew, and that was doing a required annual night evaluation. They did have night vision goggles. The 12th Aviation Battalion, as of now, is granted a 48-hour operational pause on contingency missions as what happened is reviewed. And a senior level aviation team, an investigative team from our Aviation Safety Center, was deployed last night and already is in Washington, D.C. to investigate what's going on. We anticipate that the investigation will quickly be able to determine whether the aircraft was in the corridor and at the right altitude at the time of the incident.
That's the key thing. There are questions to be answered that the Secretary of Defense cannot answer about the civilian airliner or about his Black Hawk crew, but I am confident that they will be transparent. This morning, John Thune, Majority Leader for the Republican, went to the Senate floor and did this, cut number 4.
Mr. President, before I begin, I want to comment on last night's horrific tragedy. As most now know, last night around 9 p.m., a passenger flight out of Wichita, Kansas, coming into Reagan National Airport, collided with a Black Hawk helicopter based out of Fort Belvoir. As recovery efforts continue, authorities confirmed that they do not expect any survivors. Mr. President, there are few words and instances like this. Only our heartfelt prayers for those who have received unbearable news over the past few hours, and our gratitude for rescue personnel who spent the night searching for survivors and remain on the river. It's too early to know why last night's crash occurred, but we're going to find out. And Congress and federal agencies will be closely examining this tragedy to ensure that America's skies are safe. Mr. President, my prayers today are with all those suffering, with our first responders, and with our Kansas senators and everyone affected by this terrible event.
Then President Trump went to the White House press room to deliver a 17-minute statement, followed by questions. I can't play that all. Here's the beginning of it, cut number 1.
Thank you very much. I speak to you this morning in an hour of anguish for our nation. Just before 9 p.m. last night, an American Airlines regional jet carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter carrying 3 military service members over the Potomac River in Washington, D.C., while on final approach to Reagan National Airport. Both aircraft crashed instantly and were immediately submerged into the icy waters of the Potomac. Real tragedy. The massive search and rescue mission was underway throughout the night, leveraging every asset at our disposal, and I have to say the local, state, federal, military, including the United States Coast Guard in particular, they've done a phenomenal job. So quick, so fast, it was mobilized immediately. The work has now shifted to a recovery mission. Sadly, there are no survivors. This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history, and a tragedy of terrible proportions. As one nation, we grieve for every precious soul that has been taken from us so suddenly, and we are a country of really, we are in mourning. This has really shaken a lot of people, including people, very sadly, from other nations who were on the flight. For the family members back in Wichita, Kansas, here in Washington, D.C., and throughout the United States and in Russia, we have a Russia contingent, some very talented people, unfortunately, were on that plane. Very, very, very sorry about that. Whose loved ones were aboard the passenger jet. We can only begin to imagine the agony that you're all feeling. Nothing worse. On behalf of the First Lady, myself, and 340 million Americans, our hearts are shattered alongside yours, and our prayers are with you now and in the days to come. We'll be working very, very diligently in the days to come. We're here for you to wipe away the tears and to offer you our devotion, our love, and our support. There's great support. In moments like this, the differences between Americans fade to nothing compared to the bonds of affection and loyalty that unite us all, both as Americans and even as nations. We are one family, and today we are all heartbroken. We're all searching for answers. That icy, icy Potomac, it was a cold, cold night cold water. We're all overcome with the grief for many who have so tragically perished.